She didn't expect her entire world to flip in a matter of minutes. One moment, JoJo Siwa was backstage getting ready for one of the biggest appearances of her tour, and the next, she could barely catch a breath. A sharp, stabbing pressure started spreading through her stomach, cutting straight through her usual pre-show adrenaline. She tried to steady herself, tried to stretch it out, tried to pretend it was just another random ache from years of nonstop dancing. But this time, her body wasn't letting her push it aside. Before she even fully understood what was happening, she was doubled over, gasping for air, with pain so intense it felt like her entire core was shutting down. Her mom rushed in, trying to help her get dressed, but JoJo couldn't even lift her arms. Every breath was a battle. And just outside that room, thousands of fans were already gathering, expecting the explosive, high-energy show she always promised. But instead of heading toward the stage, she found herself being lifted into an ambulance, lights flashing, sirens slicing through the cold Minnesota air. The last thing she saw before the doors closed was the massive mall where she was supposed to perform, a reminder that her body had finally forced her into a moment she'd been avoiding for years. She wasn't just dealing with pain, she was facing a hidden fight she never thought she'd have to confront. And none of her fans knew how close she came to missing the show entirely, or how serious things really were.
The day started like any other tour stop. Minnesota's Mall of America was already packed long before showtime, with fans filling every corner, holding signs, shouting her name, waiting for the kind of explosive energy JoJo delivers without fail. She'd done shows sick, shows exhausted, shows injured. Nothing ever stopped her. At least, that's what everyone thought. But while the crowd buzzed outside, something inside her body was shifting. A tight pressure started building low in her abdomen, the kind of discomfort she tried to brush off as stress, or maybe just cramps from rehearsing earlier. She kept moving through her routine, forcing herself to breathe through it, telling herself it was nothing. That's the part that made her so respected as a performer. She always pushed through the uncomfortable moments. Except this time, the pain didn't back down. It spiked, hard. A sudden wave hit her so intensely that it knocked the air straight out of her lungs. She froze, gripping onto whatever was closest, trying to take even one steady breath. The air just wouldn't come. Not fully, not deeply. Every inhale felt like fire. Her mom rushed in, already recognizing the difference between normal pre-show nerves and whatever this was. JoJo tried to stand, tried to slip into her outfit, but the pain locked her in place. She couldn't even lift her arms long enough to get dressed. That's when her mom stepped in, helping her piece together her stage look, while JoJo tried to keep herself from collapsing. Still, even with the agony radiating across her stomach and chest, she tried to laugh it off. She insisted she'd be fine. She told everyone not to worry. She said she just needed a minute. It was the same routine she had used 100 times to push through injuries no one ever heard about. Classic performer instinct. Pretend nothing is wrong until the moment you physically can't. But this wasn't something she could mentally push away. The pain kept climbing, sharper, heavier, stealing her breath and folding her forward. And when her vision blurred and she couldn't form a full sentence, she finally realized this wasn't something she could shake off, and neither did anyone around her. That's when the call for the ambulance was made, because whatever was happening wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating. The ambulance barely stopped before the medical team had her inside, firing off questions she could hardly answer. Every bump in the road had already felt like a shockwave through her stomach, and by the time she reached the ER, the pain was so sharp it was difficult for her to even sit upright. Nurses moved quickly, getting her vitals, pressing gently around her abdomen, and each touch made her wince. Whatever was happening wasn't mild. It was something deep, something serious. As she tried to steady her breathing, she kept thinking about the fans waiting at the mall. She asked how long the test would take. She asked if she could still make the show. The doctors exchanged the kind of looks that made it clear she wasn't grasping the severity of what they were worried about. They rushed her for an ultrasound, hoping for answers. And that's when everything clicked. On the screen, they spotted the problem immediately. An ovarian cyst had already ruptured, spilling fluid and blood into her stomach. It explained the stabbing pressure, the difficulty breathing, the overwhelming waves of pain. A burr cyst isn't just uncomfortable, it's brutal. The body reacts fast, locking up, tightening everything inside, sending sharp pulses that feel like something is tearing from the inside out. The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. He told her that this kind of rupture can drop someone to their knees. He said she needed rest, monitoring, and possibly further treatment if the internal bleeding didn't slow down. The safest option was to stop everything, stay at the hospital, and let her body stabilize. But JoJo had one thought, the thousands of fans waiting for her. She kept insisting she'd be okay. She asked how quickly they could treat her. She told them she'd go on stage even if she had a limp across it. The medical team warned her that performing could make the pain worse, or risk her ending up right back in the ER before the night was over. But she wasn't hearing any of it. The show, in her mind, wasn't optional. She wasn't being reckless. She just couldn't shake the mindset she lived with for years. The belief that stopping, even for one night, meant she was letting people down. And while doctors eventually cleared her to leave, under strict instructions to come back if the pain intensified, they were very clear that most people in her condition would have been lying in bed, not preparing for a performance. She understood the risk, and she walked out anyway. Long before that hospital visit, JoJo had been living in a constant cycle of rehearsals, travel, filming, recording, and back-to-back performances. Most people only see the glitter, the lights, the high-energy shows, but they rarely see the toll that rhythm can take on someone who's been in the spotlight since childhood. JoJo didn't just dance. She launched herself across stages, flipped, kicked, jumped, and powered through routines that would exhaust even professional athletes. And she did it almost every day for more than 10 years. She often mentioned the little aches that came with the job, brushing them off the way performers do when they've trained themselves to push through. If her feet hurt after hours of choreography, she'd laugh about it in her videos. When she felt run down from lack of sleep, she'd crack a joke online about living on caffeine and adrenaline. Even when her schedule was packed so tightly that she barely had time to breathe between commitments, she'd post something like, "Rest? Never heard of her," as if slowing down was a punchline to a joke. But the reality behind those jokes was something only the internet half understood. Touring at a high level demands physical and mental endurance that stretches past normal limits. There's pressure, not necessarily from one person, but from the machine around you, to keep raising the bar. Bigger performances, bigger stunts, bigger expectations. And for someone like JoJo, who built her brand on unstoppable energy, the pressure to always deliver became part of her identity. She's talked before about feeling the need to outdo her last performance, to prove she could handle anything thrown at her. And behind every viral clip of her sprinting across a stage or nailing a complex routine, there were countless hours of rehearsal where she didn't give herself permission to slow down. Not because someone forced her, but because she didn't want anyone to think she couldn't handle the grind. Over the years, fans noticed a pattern. She'd push through exhaustion, post about being tired, joke about never resting, and then jump right back into another practice session. It became a running theme of her life. Work first, recovery second. And while nothing in her past hinted directly at the medical scare she faced in Minnesota, the pace she kept was enough to make anyone wonder how long she could keep moving at full speed without her body demanding a break. Looking back, there were quiet hints scattered throughout JoJo's content, the kind of subtle signs people only noticed after the hospital scare. In a few older clips, she casually mentioned feeling bloated or unusually tired, brushing it off with her usual upbeat attitude. At the time, no one thought much of it. She was constantly rehearsing, filming, flying from city to city. Feeling worn out seemed normal for someone who basically lived on stage. But once fans connected those small moments to the night of the burr cyst, a different picture started forming. Some viewers went back through her posts and pointed out how often she talked about running on minimal sleep. Others mentioned the way she'd joke about being exhausted while sprinting straight into another commitment. It never looked alarming, but it did paint the picture of someone who wasn't giving herself the space to fully recover between performances. Her schedule didn't offer many breaks to begin with. Between tours, studio sessions, public appearances, and her new content projects, downtime was almost non-existent. Even when she wasn't performing, she was training, rehearsing, or preparing for whatever came next. Rest wasn't part of her routine. Momentum was. That intense pace became so normal for her that slowing down probably felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Online conversations started picking up right after the hospital news broke. Some fans questioned whether she'd been pushing herself harder than anyone realized. Others speculated about burnout, pointing to the way she always seemed to power through anything, no matter how drained she looked. And a few wondered aloud if her body had been trying to slow her down long before Minnesota forced the issue. None of this meant JoJo had done something wrong. It was just a familiar pattern so many performers fall into, the mindset that grinding nonstop is the price you pay to stay at the top. And JoJo had always played her role with full intensity, never letting the world see how heavy the pressure could get behind the scenes. But regardless of the whispers and warning signs fans pieced together later, one thing was clear in that ER. JoJo wasn't focused on past hints or what she might have missed. Even while lying in a hospital bed, JoJo couldn't stop thinking about the performance she was missing. The Mall of America show wasn't just another date on her schedule. It was one of the biggest stops on her holiday run, a crowd she'd been excited about for weeks. Thousands of kids, parents, and longtime fans had already lined up, many of them traveling hours just to see her. And the idea of disappointing them hit her harder than the pain itself. So while doctors were explaining the rupture, the bleeding, and the need to monitor her closely, JoJo's first instinct wasn't fear. It was urgency. She kept asking how quickly they could get everything done. She wanted timelines, treatments, anything that would help her get out of that room and back to the mall. She made it clear she wasn't planning to cancel. She just needed them to patch her up, as she put it, and send her back to work. The doctors warned her it wasn't wise. They told her the pain would surge again, that performing could make everything harder, that she needed to rest. But she wasn't listening through the lens of a patient. She was listening as a performer who had spent her life believing the audience comes first, even when her body begs for mercy. It wasn't ego, and it wasn't denial. It was the same drive that fueled her entire career. That mindset where dedication starts blurring into something borderline dangerous, where the fear of letting people down overpowers the fear of hurting yourself. It's the instinct performers learn early. No matter what, the show still happens. So when the doctors finally cleared her to leave, with strict warnings and the understanding that she might need to return, she didn't hesitate. She stood up, braced herself, and decided she was going to give the crowd everything she had left, even if it wasn't much. Stepping onto that stage wasn't glamorous. She wasn't moving at full speed. She wasn't hitting every mark with her usual fire, and she was still fighting waves of pain that kept pulsing through her stomach. But the moment she saw the fans cheering, something in her shifted. The adrenaline kicked in just enough to carry her forward. It wasn't her flashiest performance, but it was easily one of her most emotional, because people had no idea she'd just come from a hospital bed. And when that final song ended and she walked off the stage holding herself carefully, it left the audience buzzing, not just with admiration, but with a deeper worry they hadn't felt before. JoJo's decision to push through that kind of pain didn't come out of nowhere. Over the last couple of years, she's been navigating one of the hardest transitions any childhood star ever faces, shedding the kid-friendly image that made her famous and stepping into a more mature, grown-up version of herself. That shift brought massive attention, but it also came a wave of criticism from people who weren't ready to see her evolve. Every hairstyle change, every edgier performance, every new artistic direction sparked debate across social media. She's been under a microscope, with millions of viewers analyzing every move she makes. And for someone who built her entire career on high energy and nonstop positivity, the pressure to prove she could handle adulthood in the entertainment world was heavier than most people realized. She wasn't just fighting for relevance. She was fighting to be taken seriously. Each performance, each interview, each project felt like another chance to show she wasn't a kid anymore, that she could keep up with a world that moves fast and rarely forgives mistakes. That kind of pressure doesn't stay online. It follows you into rehearsals, into tour buses, into late-night planning sessions that run long after the cameras turn off. For performers who start young, there's an unspoken belief they're expected to outdo themselves at every turn. Slow down too much, and people start whispering. Take a break, and suddenly the narrative shifts to falling off. It creates a mindset where rest feels dangerous, like stepping away for even a moment might make the world replace you. JoJo has talked about that fear in subtle ways. The fear of losing momentum, of disappointing fans, of giving critics exactly what they want. And when you layer that on top of a brutal work schedule, it's no wonder she pushed herself to get back on stage even after a medical emergency. In her mind, anything less might have looked like she couldn't handle the heat that comes with her new era. For young entertainers, especially those trying to reinvent themselves, the pressure isn't just professional, it becomes personal. Every performance becomes a test, every appearance a chance to prove they deserve their place. And for JoJo, that Minnesota show wasn't just another gig. It was another moment where she felt she had to show the world she was strong enough to keep going. But what she didn't realize that night was that the performance wasn't the end of her battle. It was just the beginning of the uncertainty that came next. When the performance ended and the adrenaline wore off, reality came rushing back. The pain didn't vanish just because she'd made it through the show. In fact, it settled in heavier, reminding her that what happened earlier wasn't just a dramatic moment. It was a warning. Doctors had told her the rupture should resolve on its own, but they also made it clear she wasn't fully out of danger. If the pain sharpened, if the bleeding continued, if anything fell off, she'd have to come straight back. No delays, no pushing through, no exceptions. And even with all that in mind, JoJo woke up the next day still feeling the lingering ache, the discomfort that came in waves, the reminder that her body wasn't finished healing. She wasn't at zero, not even close. She posted updates with her usual mix of humor and optimism, but underneath, there was a seriousness that fans didn't miss. This wasn't a small injury. This was her body demanding she pay attention. Fans picked up on that immediately. Social media turned into a swirl of concern, with people pleading for her to slow down. Comments flooded her posts, telling her she didn't have to prove anything, that no show was worth pushing herself to the edge, that the people who care about her would rather see her rest than drag herself on stage while hurting. Some fans even pointed out that they'd been worried for months, noticing the long schedules, the constant flights, the intense rehearsals she barely took breaks from. To them, this wasn't a random emergency. It was a shock that felt like the climax of something brewing behind the scenes. The incident sparked a bigger conversation, one that went far beyond JoJo herself. People started talking about the hidden cost of fame, especially for performers who began their careers young. The long hours, the pressure to stay relevant, the fear that slowing down will cost them everything they built, the reality that many stars push themselves to the limit because they feel like they don't have a choice. JoJo suddenly became a symbol of that struggle, the bright, unstoppable figure who finally ran into a wall she couldn't jump over. But even with all the concern, all the warnings, and all the support, there's still an open question hanging over her recovery. She's strong, determined, and stubborn in ways that have taken her far. But those same traits could make her push herself harder than she should. And with her health still unpredictable, fans can't help wondering what comes next. Whether she'll actually listen to the signals her body is giving her, or whether she'll keep fighting to the pain in her pursuit to stay at the top. JoJo's hospital scare wasn't just an isolated emergency. It exposed something much bigger happening behind the curtain of her career. For years, people had watched her leap across stages with superhuman energy, almost forgetting that underneath the glitter, the choreography, and the bright persona is a human being who can only push so hard before her body pushes back. This incident peeled back the shine and revealed the harsh truth that nonstop performing comes with a price most fans never see. In the entertainment world, especially for young stars, there's an unspoken rule. Keep going. Push through the aches. Ignore the warnings. Don't let anyone think you're slowing down. It's a culture built on momentum. The idea that performers must always be bigger, louder, stronger, more explosive than they were last time. And when someone grows up inside that system, it becomes second nature to hide pain, pretend everything's fine, and step on stage no matter what's happening internally. JoJo has embodied that mindset from the start. Her entire brand is built on resilience and boundless energy. People expect her to show up smiling, dancing, and delivering that spark she's become known for. And she's taken pride in living up to that expectation. But the same determination that fans admire, the strength, the dedication, the refusal to quit, can also turn into a silent danger. Because when you're trained to keep going, even when everything hurts, it becomes almost impossible to recognize when you need to stop. The Minnesota incident wasn't just a medical problem. It was a reminder that even the strongest performers have limits, and ignoring those limits can lead to moments that are far more serious than anyone expects. It highlighted how easy it is for constant pressure to disguise itself as ambition, and how quickly ambition can turn into self-neglect when you feel like the world is watching your every move. Her willingness to go straight from a hospital bed to a stage showed incredible commitment, but it also revealed just how far she's willing to go to maintain the image she's built. It showed the razor-thin line between dedication and danger, and how easily someone in her position can cross it without realizing. And whether she meant to or not, JoJo's ordeal forced fans, critics, and even the entertainment industry itself to look at the reality behind performances they celebrate. Because behind every high-energy show, there's a person carrying the weight of expectations. And sometimes that weight becomes too heavy to ignore.